Hi, Julie. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hey, Julia. So happy to be here. I'm a huge fan of this podcast. I listen to it every week faithfully, so I'm honored to be on here.
Oh, great. We're so excited to have you. And I think, we've built this little community of listeners, but then also guests, and everything kind of comes full circle. So I'm super happy to be chatting with you today. What I would love to do to start is, can you share with our listeners what you're currently doing in the health and wellness space? I know you've gone through IHP, you can share all of that. And then we'll kind of back it up a little bit and talk about how you got started with health and wellness and what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So primarily now I'm working with women, kind of my demographic, over 40, who are struggling to kind of balance their metabolic issues. A lot of them come to me with, hormone dysregulation. They're perimenopausal or menopausal. Some of them have thyroid issues. Some of them, just general hormone issues. But the one thing most all of them want to do is lose weight. So I see that. And I mean, it frustrates me on some level that that's always the goal, but I see it, that's what people really have as their first objective. But it gives me an opportunity to kind of touch on all of the health related foundational things. And then the weight loss is always kind of the side effect. So I get to prioritize their health and help them kind of just learn about what to do. And they get the weight loss as a result. So it's funny, I just listened to a podcast earlier this week. I'm a huge podcast listener. And, the statistics keep climbing. And currently the rate of people that are overweight is 75%, and the obesity rate is 42%. It keeps climbing like every year. So it's astounding to me, but that's, what people really need. They feel like they're struggling with weight, and really there are a lot of other things they're struggling with, but that's the main thing I see. So I'm working mainly with women in a group setting. I have a group program that I launched a little over a year ago. It's called the Total Body Balance. So just like it says, I touch on all of the things. I touch on digestion, toxicity, hormones, thyroid, all the things that are really kind of impacting women. And then, I have a specific kind of diet program and exercise. I kind of incorporate all of those things. So that's the main thing I'm working on. I do occasionally see partners of some of these women. So I see some men on occasion. And then I also see, a fair amount of 20-year-olds who maybe want to work with me one-on-one because their mom worked with me or something like that. So I see a lot of different, kind of demographics, but the primary group is those ladies over 40.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting how you said most of them kind of come to you wanting to lose weight, right? I feel like most people who do not have the vast knowledge that an IHP have, right? Like they just think, okay, like health equals weight equals like, if I'm overweight, like I need to lose this weight and get healthy, right? But they don't necessarily, they're not in tune to say like, oh, I need to like rebalance my gut, right? So I love how you said the weight is, the intro to how you can help them. And then ultimately you're doing lots of this other stuff on the side to rebalance their body, and they're getting the weight loss, which is what they initially wanted, but you're not just like cutting their calories and sending them on their way. You're kind of doing it in a way that's going to help them long term. And yeah, I think it's, the only thing that doctors ever say, like you go to the doctor and if you're overweight, they'll be like, you should lose some weight.
Exactly.
Right? Heart issues, or so it's just how like, I think societally we've been conditioned to think is, got to lose weight. And of course for women, it's a vanity thing, but yeah, I love how you're doing all the foundational stuff to kind of get them there, right? That's so important.
Yeah. And I try to convince them, at the end of the day, that the number on the scale is not going to dictate their life. And actually, part of my program is fitness. So, anyone that knows me knows that I love fitness. And people they're misinformed. They think, like I have to cut calories, exercise more, all those things, the things that we as health coaches know that are not going to work long term. But like I tell people, once you start gaining muscle, which is very, very important for women over 40, once you start gaining muscle, the scale is, maybe not the best barometer of what your ultimate outcome is going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it makes your metabolism so much more efficient. Yeah. It's freedom. And I always say, like, the more muscle you have, the more freedom you have to eat some of the things that you want, and you have better energy and you have better sleep, right? Like you're not always chasing the scale, which can kind of be like this never ending cycle.
Exactly.
So how did you get started in the health and fitness, health and wellness space? Is it something you've always been interested in? Give us a little bit of a backstory.
So it's kind of funny listening to this podcast all the time. I'm always intrigued by those people that had some of, random profession and then they became a health coach. I'm the opposite. I've my entire life been interested in health and wellness. And as you and I were talking earlier, I think a lot of it goes back to my upbringing. So my dad was a veterinarian. So I grew up in a family that, he was taking care of animals, but he was always kind of taking care of animals. He was taking care of humans too, because obviously people love their pets. I grew up in a super small town of 600 people in the middle of pastures of cows in rural Wisconsin. So that was kind of my first introduction to taking care of, animals and people. And then also my dad was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 5. So I was, you're watching your dad pricking his finger and giving injections, 3 or 4 times a day. So that was kind of it was very intriguing to me. And then shortly after that, my older sister was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So we always had in our house, we had this special sugar and we didn't have treats and we didn't, I went to my friend's house and they had soda. I think I called it pop at the time. They had, Pop-Tarts and things we never had. So it was a really early introduction to the fact that eating affects, a lot of things in your health. So I always wanted to do something kind of geared toward health. I actually went to college thinking I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon because I was always into fitness. I was a, high school athlete. Shortly after that, I decided, I don't want to be in college forever. So I got a degree in physical therapy and did that, loved it. I also got a certification as an athletic trainer. My very first job was I was the physical therapist for the Ladies Pro Golf Tour. And still to this day, I don't golf, but it was a great kind of, segue into what I'm doing. So anyway, that's kind of the whole backstory. And then I had 4 kids in 5 years and took a little break, kind of stopped doing my PT stuff and then jumped back into life as a health coach after I got introduced to Dr. Cabral and, kind of did some advanced training.
Yeah, of course. So I'm curious because, I know actually a few kids that grew up super, super healthy, and it was less about health focused and more deprivation. And when they went to college, they went off the rails. They ate and drank as much as they could, right? Because everything was so strict. But it sounds like your upbringing had the education component to okay, well, if we consume these types of things, right, this is the outcome. And then, your dad and your sister don't feel great. And it seems like there was almost more of an empowerment type of tone to yours, right? And not necessarily massive restriction. I'm curious what your take is on kind of, because before we signed on, we were talking about how that is, has a lot to do with what people then go ahead and think about, as far as health and wellness is concerned and what the focus is. And I'm curious if you found that empowering, right? And what link you think kind of that has to then what people pass on to the next generation, right? The generational link to this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, actually, I wouldn't say that there was a lot of education in terms of my parents explaining a lot, because I don't think they thought we were capable of maybe understanding all the things. And I wouldn't say that there was deprivation. We still, I grew up in Wisconsin. So I tell people I don't eat dairy now, but I have so much cheese in my, in my system from the first 18 years of life. So we always had, there were always kind of, there's ice cream or something like that. I never felt deprived as a child. And I would say, even just telling you those statistics about obesity. So I'm one of 5, and statistically, at least 2 or 3 of us should be overweight or obese, and none of us are. And I don't think any of us kind of went off the rails, but I do think that it just set a foundation for going forward for how we kind of lived our life. And same with I have 4 kids of my own, just like I'm sure your kids, they know, I didn't deprive of them. They got to have cotton candy and things like that. It's just about a balance. So I do think that that's part of the problem just in society. And even, women I take care of, they didn't have those foundational kind of things in their life that, maybe led them down a journey of health versus kind of where they are.
Yes. Yeah. And exactly like you said, it's a balance, right? And not doing so much of one thing, right? Because I think that there can be, you can do too much of that, like perfection, right? And kind of kids are kids and they're around other kids. I'm, super careful about people will always say like, oh my God, I can't believe your kids are eating pizza. Or, well, I'll show up to a birthday party and, they'll be like, oh, there's, I got a gluten-free pizza, because somebody thinks that like my kids are just automatically gluten-free or that the gluten-free is better. But I always say I am very careful about what they have when I'm in control so that when they're at a birthday party or they're doing something else, right, they're not, that stuff doesn't tip the scales and doesn't create a whole lot of that kind of dis-ease type of setup, right? Because 85% of the time they are eating fairly well. And like, we just don't keep it in the house. And it's not like what we have here, but there's occasions and holidays and all that special time where they can have what is at the birthday party, right? So that it's not, and I think, that's exactly what you said, which is, a lot of the stuff just wasn't in the house, but you also weren't deprived of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I find too that kids who like understand why, and not that like I over explain things, but my kids, I tell them why, like, actually, we're not going to have that because it has dye in it. And that information, like then they're able to actually understand why versus me just saying like, no, it's because I'm the mom. I never say like, because I said so, because then they're able to understand the correlation and they know I'm not being like a mean mom.
Exactly. And, the thing is, most people, I just don't think they understand. And we both follow people in the grocery store and I see what they put in their carts and, they think it's food, even though it's in a box. And, I heard someone speak on a podcast one time. He talked about boxes and bags with barcodes. Like that's what most people are eating. And they know they should eat fruits and vegetables. And, they've heard that, but they don't really understand that, a box of Cheerios and a bag of this and all those things are not really food that's going to serve them in any, valuable way for their health.
Yes. Yeah. And to that point, it's interesting because my son actually just recently, we were somewhere and I was like, we're not going to have that because sometimes dyes makes him super hyperactive and kind of can, it just neurologically affects him. And so he said to me, but how come the other moms let their kids have them? And I said, you know what? They don't know. They're not a health coach. No health coach has explained this to them. And they actually might not even know that there's dye in that food. It's not something that everybody knows because I'm very careful about what I kind of have them perceive other people as too. I said, that mom loves those kids just as much as I love you. Oh, the problem is nobody has probably explained to her what I know. I said, but we're lucky. I know what I know. And because I know better, we're going to do better. And I think it's important for, kids to kind of get that explanation too. But yeah, you're right. There's just so many, and people think they're doing healthy things, right? Like they're buying whatever, the gluten-free crackers that might have terrible oils in them or, right. It's such and you're in a store filled with this stuff. It's almost more of a, country issue than an actual. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The first book I ever read, which, when I had all four of my kids within 5 years of age. So first of all, I was a little crazy because it was madness, but I didn't know obviously the things that
are there multiple?
No. I had 5 pregnancies in 5 years. I actually lost one. I had an ectopic, but no, they're all single pregnancies.
My word.
Yeah. So I look back or I look at moms or I look at you and think like, how did I do that? But, so yes, there were times when they were little that I didn't really understand, obviously the fruits and vegetables, but I didn't understand the dyes and all those things. And I remember I read this book, I think it was called The Unhealthy Truth, when my kids were little. And it was written by a mom of 4 who's one of her children had this severe anaphylactic reaction to, I think, eggs or peanuts or something like that. And she took like a deep dive into what was in food and the dyes and all the things. So that was kind of eye-opening, kind of really started my journey down like the holistic health path, instead of just, the allopathic kind of health path. which I was trained in. But yeah, so it's always a journey. You know, you learn, that's my goal, to learn something new every day. That's why I listen to so many podcasts, because I can multitask and still learn something while I'm doing that.
Yeah, it's honestly, one of my most favorite things about what we do is like, there's always something to learn, right? Like you're never going to just be there, right? There's even Dr. Cabral, he's always learning. It's an amazing field for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, you have 4 kids, and do they kind of value health and wellness? Do they have kind of like this similar mindset that you would kind of hope you instilled in them?
Yeah. And that's why, back to like our conversation about so many things start in the home. I feel like, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is some of those early impressions that I had. And so my oldest is a nurse. My second is in nursing school. My third is actually, and they're all very, into kind of health, wellness, sometimes to a little bit of, I don't want to say extreme, but they really, they kind of don't always approve of some of the things their friends are having or eating. And I'm like, you guys, everyone's got to have their things that they're 20, right? But then my third, it was thinking about dietetics. She's actually doing fashion instead. So, but they all kind of talked about, we want to do what you and dad do. My husband's an orthopedic surgeon. So there's always a lot of science and, medical talk at our house. But yeah, for the most part, they all kind of, are in that same kind of field. And my husband said early on, he's like, I'm so thankful that you feed our kids well, and that you know those things that you know. And honestly, I give him a lot of information too, because he doesn't have time to go search for, a lot of the other things that are happening in the health field. He kind of niches down in what he does, orthopedics. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, you can kind of see, the fruits of your labor, later on too. And it's nice to be able to, it's good that he's grateful for what you instilled in them. Cause sometimes it's hard. I just recently had a conversation with a friend, before I had kids. I would kind of, there wasn't judgment, but I would kind of be like, oh man, I can't, like, how do you feed your kid fast food all the time? People that I knew like weren't doing it for financial reasons, right? But now I actually get, regardless of how cheap it is, the ease of it. I mean, it's challenging to make a homemade meal every single night. I'm grateful that I have the, resources and the knowledge to do so. But to do that every single night, there's nights where I'm like, oh my God, I'd rather just order pizza, or weeks on end where I'm like, I would just rather order food. And usually when you order, it's going to be crummy stuff, right? Or I'm taking my son home from hockey and I've planned ahead and put something in the crock pot, right? But if I haven't, like a drive-through would be, super easy. And so I know why people make those choices. Life is chaotic. And sometimes you have to plan ahead. Like I make dinner sometimes at 9:30 a.m. because if I don't, and it's not like already ready, forget it. Like my choices are not going to be as great for the kids. And so as a mom, if that's your job primarily, right? Even if you're working, if you're the one that's making meals, it takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort to make sure that your family is fed good food. It just does. And it's something that I would never take away from any mom that chooses to do it. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. It is. And that's what I try to teach my clients. Like you can literally make a healthy meal in 20 minutes. You have to get used to it, and you have to kind of know the system. I mean, and after doing it this many years, I do have systems. And when my kids were little, yeah, I was like, felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants many, many times. But, yeah. And there are some healthier alternatives for fast food. Like if I have to go get something, we'll go to Chipotle and I get, whatever. There are things that you can do, but I'll still never forget when I first took my daughter to preschool. And I remember one of the teachers asking about, which one is your kid? And I said her name. And they said, oh, she's the one that has like avocados and fish in her lunch. And I was like, doesn't everybody, then I realized it just opened my eyes having kids go through public school, what is going on like with our food system. And that was honestly one of my first objectives when my kids were little was I'm going to change what's in the public school lunches. And I honestly just never had time to dive into that because I think it was a bigger task than I was prepared for. So I just obviously made my kids their lunch. But yeah, it's kind of foundational what is going on with our, food system, and it's impacting everyone from kids, early to the women I see that are 40, when they've been eating like that for years. It's hard to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And the truth is I think, again, from a money perspective, right? Like these public schools are choosing what's cheapest, easiest. And a lot of parents, don't have the education, right? The educational background to kind of question, or if a lot of parents knew maybe what was in some of this stuff, right? Like a bunch of them could band together and talk about changing it. And so I think that's why, the whole IHP movement, the education that we're bringing to people's lives and to people's homes is really what's going to change things down the line, because maybe then a few moms do, get loud at a, school meeting and kind of just say like, can we change, some of this stuff out? And yeah, it's all about knowing better and then doing better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids too. I mean, I feel like, there's certain kids have, tastes for things that, like, oh, chicken nuggets, like kids would find chicken nuggets way more exciting than you or I for whatever reason. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is I always say from the beginning, my kids ate what I made for dinner. I think just assuming, right, that a 2-year-old needs macaroni and cheese over, what you're eating, I always made one meal and theirs was either just cut up super small or it was blended when they were really little. And so that they didn't get used to like only having kid food, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
I know people that just do kid food for the kids and then their meal is something different. And that also kind of just sets their mental state up that like, okay, this is the stuff I eat because I'm a kid. And so, yeah, it's all about the foundations and what kind of starts from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a big advocate for just like one ingredient foods, and that's what I tell my clients, like eat broccoli, eat, cauliflower, eat a protein, but that's how I always fed my kids too. They had a couple vegetables, back in the days when they didn't want things touching each other. But that's foundational too. And that's how I try to coach my clients as well. And that's how I still cook. A lot of people want a fancy recipe, or they want something that's, takes 2 hours to make. And if they want that, I can give them that. But I'm just a huge advocate of, eat your veggies, eat your protein, eat, some fruits, eat a little, if you can eat some grains, but just keep it simple. And it doesn't have to take a long time.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, the simplicity of it is key. So as that a little segue from that, so when you're doing the group coaching, do you find that most women have similar hangups? It sounds like there's like this, either they've, been eating and doing the same thing for a long time. And then they think that it has to be much more complicated than it really has to be. Do you find that you have to like bring them almost like back down?
Yeah, well, for sure. I think one thing that they all struggle with is mindset. They're just like their whole life revolves around their weight. And that is one obstacle that they can't just, takes a deeper dive than just, diet and exercise. So mindset is huge. A lot of them they have misperceptions about how they should exercise, what they should eat. Most people are not eating enough. They undervalue protein. They are exercising wrong. They think they have to go just spend hours and hours in the gym. And then most of them don't realize how much stress plays a role in their health and in their weight. Also, just because they're perimenopausal or menopausal, there are a lot of physiological things that are going on too that a lot of them just need education around. So they don't, they're all gloom and doom about, I'm menopausal. The rest of, my life is going to be in a downward trajectory from here on out. So, they all have very similar issues. And I see a lot of clients, I would say the majority of my clients have some underlying digestive issues too, that they just, think is normal.
Sure. Yeah, because it's, again, something that mainstream, medicine doesn't necessarily pay much attention to. And I think a lot of women just think like, oh, well, of course I'm like bloated after meals, or, that it just tends to kind of get to, women just, they're not understanding that there's a solution too, right? Because if it's, normal, right, then everybody, or if there was a solution, why wouldn't everybody be doing it? But it's just that it's not highly educated. And yes, I think women, as far as the whole weight and mindset and stress thing, I think it's one thing that plagues probably 95% of women, right? I think, yes, we live in this amazing world where you can have a job and you can raise kids and you can, do all the things, but it doesn't mean that that doesn't eventually take a toll on our metabolic system, right? Whether it be with our cycles or whether it be blood sugar regulation or just cortisol, and how that plays into the inability for our bodies to kind of healthfully shed weight or kind of maintain a healthy body weight. And so many women just think like, I'm doing what every other woman's doing, right? We're all stressed. I have so many clients report like, oh, I'm not that much more stressed than anybody else. Right.
Oh, wow. No, I'm the opposite. I feel like everybody, when I look at their intake form, I feel like pretty much every client I have is at least a 7. So I feel like everyone is stressed out.
But do they identify? So yes, I agree. But do they identify as being as stressed as they are? Because what I find is most women are like, I mean, I'm stressed, but like, I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. Like,
yeah, I feel like most of them are actually saying I'm really stressed. And I think a lot of them are kind of in that sandwich generation where they still have kids at home and their parents are aging and they're trying to do everything. Like no matter what age you are as a woman, you kind of are always trying to do everything. But I feel like that kind of age group really is kind of getting it from all angles. And most of them, that's where I love the lab testing once I got IHP too, when they can actually see like, oh gosh, this is what's going on. My cortisol, my thyroid, all those things, when they can actually see the numbers, it helps validate I'm not crazy, kind of.
Absolutely.
There's a reason why I'm feeling like this. There's a reason why I'm feeling bad.
Of course. Yeah. And we've been doing this long enough that we can almost nail it and know exactly what's going on, right? But the lab tests really help to show the client and motivate the client to kind of do something about all that. Yeah. So I agree. Mm-hmm. So if someone's listening and they kind of want to learn more or find out about your group program or find you on social media, where are kind of all the places that you show up?
So I have a website, juliedarwellness.com. And then social media, Julie Derr, @JulieDerr. I do quite a bit on Instagram. I've been kind of slowly doing more and more on Instagram, but I have fun with it. But yeah, those are the 2 main places you can find me.
That's great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success podcast. This was so fun. And I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom from way back when, right? A lot of people kind of, like you said, get started with this later in life, but you've kind of had it from the beginning. So I appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm honored. So it's so great to talk to you, Julia.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.